Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to this week's Friday Reads, which is another 2-week spectacular since I did not manage to update y'all last week. And I actually did read more books in the last 2 weeks than I did in the previous 2 weeks. So there's a lot to talk about, so we're just going to jump right in. But the very first thing that I finished was The Ship of the Dead by Rick Riordan. This is the third and final book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard trilogy. So this is a middle grade, young adult fantasy. I still haven't quite figured out like what age range it is, but it's middle grade or young adult fantasy. And we're following our main character of Magnus Chase. And in the very first book, he dies and goes to Valhalla. And he's basically trying to figure out how he fits into this Norse afterlife. The story goes from there. In this third book, it's the third and final book of a trilogy, so there's not much I can say other than they're fighting off the big bad. And that's pretty much all we're doing in this book, is just kind of wrapping everything up. And I did not pick this book out for myself. My older child picked it out for me. And reading this trilogy kind of drove home one of the big points of why I struggle so much with middle grade and young adult fantasy, although older young adult doesn't do this quite as much. And that is that there's a lot of things that feel very much the same. So we had a lot of very similar plot beats in all of these books. Even like in this third book, we got a bunch of character development for characters we haven't really gotten a ton of backstory on, and yet it still felt kind of all of their stories, even though it's like different people, different situations, different stories, they still had kind of a sameness to them that I was just like, I'm a little bit bored with this, even though it's like I should be really excited to kind of dive into these characters. And like even some of the development just kind of felt very the same. And so I didn't enjoy reading this really because I had that issue. Like book 1 was really good, but then book 2 felt so similar to book 1 that I just didn't enjoy it as much. And it hindered my ability to really get invested in this. And so I wasn't invested in this plot. So I'm like, I don't really care that you're fighting off this big bad. And like, I wasn't as invested in the characters because like, it just felt like their development kept following similar paths. And so this third book, I didn't love book 2 as much. And then it's just like even more in book 3. And so I didn't really enjoy it. I think that if you enjoy middle grade, you'll do a lot better because this is just generally a thing that happens in middle grade and younger young adult books that I just don't really appreciate personally. So like, I know it's a me thing, and this is kind of why I don't read these genres. But if you do and you don't have a problem with it, this is a pretty good like middle grade young adult fantasy trilogy, and there's a lot of good things it has going for it. I especially love the diversity that we get in it, and the fact that it doesn't really feel just token. It's like part of the story, and I just generally really appreciated that. So yeah, I mean, like I ended up giving this 3 stars, and I keep going back and forth of whether like I should just not rate it because like I was so not invested in this. But for now, I'm going to leave it as being rated, and I gave it 3 stars. And then I finished The Winter Long by Shauna Maguire, which is the 8th book in the October Days series. The October Days series is an adult urban fantasy series that follows our main character of October Day, who is half human and half fae and a knight in the fairy realms, and she's just kind of the problem solver for the courts because she just kind of has the skill set to be able to solve these oddball problems. In this particular book, like there's actually not a ton that I can say about this book without major spoilers. Even the back, like this is the description, these 3 sentences. So it's Toby thought she understood her own past. She thought she knew the score. She was wrong. It's time to learn the truth. Which is actually a very good description. Like once you've read it, you're like, yeah, that totally fits. But doesn't tell you basically anything. Anyway, I finished this. I really liked it. This is one of my favorite books in the series because so much stuff gets pulled in. For this series, Shauna McGuire is telling this story in 4-book arcs. So there is one big overarching plot, but then there's like mini arcs, and it's being told in like four book sets. And so this is book 8, so it's the end of the second 4-book set. And it's just so good. It pulls in so much information and world building that we've been getting all along, not just in this second 4-book set, but from like the previous books as well. It's just so good. And like, I don't know, it's really hard. Like, if you've made it this far in this series, this is the kind of book that is probably going to give you a book hangover, because it's just so well done and it pulls so much stuff together in a way that like feels almost impossible. It's like you had to have planned this out from the beginning, because so much of it fits so well together, and it's just a real treat to read. So if it wasn't abundantly clear, I did give this 5 stars. And then after that, I did go ahead and pick up A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. This is the first book in the Monk and Robot book series. It's a novella, science fiction novella series. We're set in the future where the robots have gained sentience and then basically like put down all their tools and walked off into the wilderness with the promise that they would come and check in on the humans. Well, fast forward however many years, and we're following our main character of Dex, who is a T-monk, and they are going on their route when a robot steps out of the forest and asks a very basic question that's very difficult to answer, which is, what do you need? And kind of goes from there. This is a very short novella, and in some ways it feels very slow, but still manages to pack a punch. It was really lovely because it felt like, I've heard this about Becky Chambers, that she writes hope punk, right? It's not dystopia or anything nonsense like that. It feels just kind of hopeful. And I think that that's an incredibly accurate way to describe this. I would also describe it almost as low stakes. It's sort of low stakes. Like, everything is very comfortable in this world, but you can still feel this sense of like, what am I doing with my life? And that's something that Dex grapples with in a way that I think many millennials, especially, or like middle to upper class people, are going to really, it's going to resonate with you, because like, I think especially once your basic needs are met, a lot of us are finding ourselves in this position of, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? What is my purpose? How do I find fulfillment? And this book really grapples with that in a way that I actually really appreciate. It was just kind of a very lovely read. I did end up giving this 4.5 stars. It would have been 5 stars, except that point that was being made was a little bit ham-fisted, a little bit like really in your face. And I think that the author could have backed off on that a little bit, and I think I would have enjoyed it, like fully enjoyed it. But as it was still highly enjoyable. I love it. I can't wait for the next one to come out. And then I picked up The Girl of Fire and Thorns Stories by Ray Carson. So this is a set of 3 prequel short stories following some of the characters that we meet in the Girl of Fire and Thorns trilogy. And what I will say about this collection is that if you haven't read the trilogy, this is going to be essentially meaningless. This isn't going to give you, it's not a good introduction into the world. It's not necessarily a good introduction into these characters. This is really just like, if you liked the trilogy and you want to know more background on these characters, these are the stories for you. And I don't even think that they're really truly necessary. Like, of the 3 stories, two of them, I was like, well, one of them, I was just like, I don't think you actually pulled off what you were trying to pull off. The second one, I was like, this is good, but like, I don't think actually gives us insight into this character. It's just an interesting story from their past that I did really enjoy, but like, again, didn't offer new insight. And then the third one was actually really good, and I think did give us a good amount of insight, and also was very well written. I ended up crying. So like a little bit of a mixed bag. I still enjoyed it. I don't think it's necessary, even if you did like the original trilogy. But if you want a little bit more information about these characters, it's pretty good. I ended up giving this collection 3.75 stars. And then the last thing that I finished in this last 2 weeks is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. So this is a straight up fantasy, adult fantasy. It's frequently described as like a coffee shop alternate universe with D&D characters, and that's very, very accurate. We're basically following our main character Aviv, who is an orc, and she has been part of like a mercenary gang for a very long time, and she decides to retire and open up a coffee shop. So I really enjoyed this, but I went in with really realistic expectations because I had heard it described as a coffee shop AU fan fiction. I knew what to expect. Those are fan fictions that I've read where it's really just like, in many cases, it's like these characters are literally setting up a coffee shop, or they work in a coffee shop and they meet, and it's frequently very slow. The plot is the coffee shop stuff. There isn't usually a ton of other things going on. So sometimes the plot will feel very thin, but it's very cozy, and it's just kind of, it's watching characters that you enjoy trying to sort out these problems that are kind of low stakes, and you still want them to succeed, but like in the end, it's kind of okay if they don't, right? The tagline on this is a novel of high fantasy and low stakes, and that is very, very true. So, but because I went in like knowing all of that, I enjoyed it so much more, and I was very much in the correct mood for this kind of story. I can absolutely see somebody coming in not knowing what a coffee shop AU tends to be, and not being in the mood for this, and just being like, this plot is super thin. What are we doing here? Like, what is the point of this book? So again, I really, really liked this. I like the characters. I like this kind of like somewhat found family aspect to it, as like Viv is bringing people in to help with her coffee shop. The plot is pretty thin. It's really just like her trying to figure out how she's going to make her coffee shop work and everything, but it's still I found it to be very lovely, and soft and very comforting. So like, I think that if you're in the mood for that, it's a very, very good book. Just make sure that you're in the mood for that. But I ended up giving it 4.25 stars. Which brings me to the things that I am in the middle of. So first and foremost, we have A Red Rose Chain by Seanan McGuire, the 9th book in the October Days series. So this book, Toby is being sent off on a diplomatic mission because a neighboring kingdom has declared war on her kingdom. And the story kind of goes from there. And like, I'm 134 pages in, and this is a buddy read. And so like, this is a rougher book in this series because we're again, it's the start of the next 4-book arc, and so we're doing a lot of setup. But also it's rough because like, Toby's being sent on this diplomatic mission, and she is not a diplomat, so she's just gonna be kind of flailing. Like, she's already starting to flail. Like I said, I'm 134 pages in, so she's already starting to flail. I know she continues to flail through this novel, but also the kingdom that she's going to, the king that's in charge of it, is just a jerk. He is that guy that is like super logical and is going to mansplain everything to you. And you're just like, okay, first of all, I didn't need that explanation. And second of all, you're actually incorrect, even though you feel like it's very logical and scientifically based. And also, could you cut the condescending out? Like, that's this king. And I hate him so much. So like every time she has to interact with him, I'm like, I hate this. Can we just smack him around? Like, can you just kill him maybe a little? Just a little. So like it's a little bit rough to get through. But like I said, I'm 134 pages in. It is really still interesting to see the setup for what's going to come, but the story is like one that I personally struggle with a little bit more. And then the other thing that I'm in the middle of is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. So this is the first book in the Wayfarer series, and it's an adult science fiction series. In this book, we're following our main character of Rosemary, who is joining this crew, this ship's crew, essentially, right before they decide to take on this rather lucrative job that also comes with a lot of risk, and they're going to have to band together to survive, kind of thing. And I restarted this. I'm actually, I did it, y'all. I picked it up. I really did. I am now on page 68, so like not terribly far in, but it is good. I am enjoying it. And like it is a little bit of a slow start though. I will say that. I like the writing style. I like the characters. Everything is good. It's just a little bit slow, and especially coming off of reading multiple slow books in a row, like this one is a little bit harder. So yeah, I just haven't made a ton of headway into this one. So as for, that's everything that I've read and everything I'm in the middle of. So moving into what I think I'm going to read next week. I don't actually know how much I'm going to read in A Red Rose Chain. That's going to depend on my buddy. I do want her to remain a little bit ahead of me because she's never read it, but I have. And if she stays ahead of me, then I can't accidentally spoil anything. So if she's reading, I'll read, but if not, then I don't know how much love this is going to be getting. But I do want to read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, but I think I need to pick up something else to kind of go alongside it because, like I said, I have been reading a lot of slower books as of late. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Some of the possibilities, though, from the library, I did check out, I think it's called The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. I don't know. It'll be linked down below, and there's going to be the cover up like normal. This is like a science fiction horror, if I remember correctly. I don't really know a ton about this because like I'm doing this challenge. I have to read a classic. I don't like classics, and somebody suggested some Ursula K. Le Guin. This one actually looked really interesting, so I figured I would at least give it a try. And I did check it out from the library. Another option that I have is The Sound of Stars, I think it's called, by Alicia Dow, which is a YA science fiction romance, I think. I don't know how this one is going to go. This would be more of a potential DNF. And then the third book I have checked out is actually The Deep by Alma Katsu, which is a historical horror. Again, I don't remember too much about it. It's been on my list for forever, though, so I thought maybe I should give it a try. And then the other possibility is Small Magics by Ilona Andrews, which is a short story collection, mostly set, I don't know if all of them or just most of them are set in the Kate Daniels world, so which would be really fun. So those are kind of like what I'm looking at for next week, although honestly, who knows what it's actually going to be. I just came back home today. I am so tired. And so even the thought of trying to pick up a book and like understand what I'm reading feels like so much work. So I don't actually know how much I'm going to read or like what it's going to look like. But those are the most likely things that I will pick up. You'll just have to tune in next week to see what actually ends up happening. But that is all I have. So if you have any thoughts or feelings about any of the books that I have mentioned in this video, please leave me a comment down below. But that's it. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!